Good evening, friends. Tonight's lesson will be in Tractate Sukkah, chapter 3. Tonight's Mishnah class is dedicated in loving memory of Rivka Bas Rav Shloimeh. In this chapter, we're going to talk about the Arba Minim, the four species, the four kinds. The Torah tells us in Vayikra, chapter 23, pasuk 40, Ulekachtem lachem b'yom harishon, and you shall take for yourself on the first day of Sukkot, Pri eitz hadar, kapis tmorim, v'anaf eitz avos, v'arvi nochal, usmachtem lifnei Hashem, eleikechem shivas yomim. You shall take for yourselves on the first day the fruit of a beautiful tree, the branches of date palms, and twigs of a plaited tree, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before Hashem, your God, for 7 days. Now, this is somewhat vague as to exactly what the four species are. And so we have an oral tradition passed down from generation from Moshe on Mount Sinai. The fruit of a beautiful tree is the esrog. The branches of a date palm is the lulav. The twig of a plaited tree is the hadas, a myrtle. And the willows of the brook are the arava. And all of the laws that pertain to this are all halacha Moshe Sinai, which is the case with most of the detailed laws of Sukkot in general. So we begin Mishnah Aleph by discussing which characteristics or which ideas will invalidate, starting with the lulav. Lulav hagozel. If a person steals a lulav, not just if he steals it, if he gets it from somebody who stole it, even if he didn't steal it. Mahayavish, or a dried out lulav. Now there's disputes as to exactly what a dried out means. Does it mean if you hit it with your fingernail, does it start crumbling? And again, there's different various opinions exactly what this means. But here we're just learning the general idea of the Mishnah. Shel Asherah. What's an Asherah? Asherah is a tree that's used for idol worship. So that's called an Asherah tree. That's the generic term for trees that are used for idol worship of some sort. V'shel ir hanadachas, as well as a lulav that comes from an ir hanadachas. What is ir hanadachas? So the Torah tells us that if there shall be a city where the majority of the people in the city are worshiping idols, 51%, and they're from, or not 51%, but a majority, a simple majority. In a city.
You burn the city.
So you kill everybody in the city by sword, and you take all the belongings of the city, you bring it into the center, you burn all of the things in the city, and this includes everybody. And you never build it again. That's called an ir hanadachas, a condemned city, a city that has been led astray. So the rule is that any of the things that belong there, that belong there, are aser bahana. They are not. You're not allowed to use it for any purpose. So says the Mishnah, if it's stolen or dried out, it's possible. If it comes from an idol worshipping tree, it's possible. If it was taken from a city that was doomed, possible. All of these cases make it possible. Niktam Roishe, what happens if the top was broken off? Now, or Nifredu Alav, or if its leaves came apart. So the halacha is, it's possible.
You can tie the top.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. So nifritzu, if the leaves severed off, it's possible. Nifridu alav, but if it didn't sever. If it just spread out, kosher. So it's kosher. Now, Rabbi Yehuda says, Yegdenu milamayla. Now, this statement, Yegdenu milamayla, now we have to understand what this is based upon. It says, Kapois Tamorim. Kapois Tamorim is, as we mentioned before, Kapois Tamorim is the lulav. Now, the word Kapois also could mean kofus, means tied together. Based on this, the sages say that the idea is that it has to be tied together, it has to be tight together. That's why if it's severed off, it's not kosher. But if it just spread out, so the fact that it can be tied together makes it kosher. Rabbi Yehuda says, Yegdenu Mamayla, you actually have to tie it together. He takes this word kapois, kofus, literally, meaning to say in all cases, you should tie it together, you should tie the lulav together. Now in our case, in our day and age, we actually put a piece of lulav and we strap it on to the lulav itself. Except after we make the bracha on Hoshana Rabbah, then we pull that off. But as we're soon going to see, the real mitzvah outside of the Beis HaMikdash is only on the first day. We'll get to those details in a little bit. Tzine Har HaBarzel, the thorn palms of the Iron Mountain, ksheris are kosher. They are different species of palm trees, and they're called the thorn palms of the Iron Mountain. That's the name of them. And they don't look like the typical lulav. Rather, each stem, each leaf, or each one of those strands of the lulav don't come quite as high as the usual lulav. And so the Gemara explains that it's only good, these types of lulavim that are Iron Mountain lulavim are only going to be kosher if the strand from the side, or the leaf from the side, at least comes to the base of the next one. So they're much more pointier than the standard lulavim that we're used to. And if the one to the right or the one to the left, let's say we use from the right side, if it comes up to at least a little past the base, or of the next leaf to the left of it or to the right of it, which means more to the center of it, of the lulav, it would be kosher. But if not, if it's like this, if this is a leaf and this is a leaf and this is the center here, if it doesn't reach the base, if it's such a style lulav, the Gemara explains that it is not kosher. Lulav sheyesh b'shloisha tefachim, a lulav that has 3 tefachim on it, 3 handbreadths. Now the Gemara actually amends this Mishnah and says ukidei lananei aboy, and it's a big difference, and enough to shake it, to wave it. Then kosher, it's kosher. What this means is, this is a huge difference. According to the Mishnah read plainly, one would conclude that a lulav that is 3 handbreadths long is kosher, because the Mishnah unamended says lulav sheyesh b'shloisha tefachim, a lulav that has 3 handbreadths, kidei lananei aboy, which allows it to be waved, kosher, it's kosher. According to the amended text and the amended version that the Gemara establishes, it would have to be 4. 1 that you hold it, and then 3 that are being waved. Gimmel. Hadas HaGozel. So now we just spoke about the lulav. Now we're going to talk about the myrtle branches. The myrtle branches has some similar laws to the lulav, and some additional laws. Hadas HaGozel v'Hayavish, just like we said before, the lulav, HaGozel, and the Yavish is possible. In this regard, the same thing will apply to the myrtle branch. Shel Asherah, if it comes from a tree that was used for idol worship, Shel Iranidachas, or if it comes from a condemned city, possible. Again, this is almost verbatim, the same as the lulav.
What's a condemned city?
We explained before you came in. A condemned city is a city where the majority have been led astray to worship idols. It's a condemned city. Everybody gets killed. Everything gets burnt in the center of town. Nothing is allowed to be used from that town. And so, being that this hadas, this myrtle, was from that town, you're not allowed to derive any benefit from it, and so it may not be used on sukkahs for a mitzvah or for any other purpose. And so, therefore, because it's from a condemned city, you can't be used. Its items cannot be used.
Never happened.
Never happened. Yeah. Niktam reishay. If the top was broken off, so the top was cut, nifritzu alav, or its leaves were severed. Oisha hayu anov of merubais me'alav, or its berries outnumbered the leaves. Puzzle, it's puzzle. Now a myrtle branch, the hadassim, have these little berries that grow on them, and as the Mishnah is going to explain, these berries, if there's more berries than there are leaves, it's not kosher. Now there is a remedy to it, as the Mishnah is going to explain momentarily. V'mi'aton, if one reduced the amount of berries, so let's say there's 30 berries, you count, there's 30 berries, and there's 29 leaves that you've counted on this hadas, on this myrtle branch. So what you can do is, you can take off some berries. V'ein memaitin b'yomtiv, however, you are not allowed to reduce the amount of berries once yomtiv starts, because then you are fixing this hadas, and fixing things are not allowed. You're not allowed to fix things on Yom Tov. But before Yom Tov, you may make it a kosher hadas by reducing the amount of berries. Arava Gzula. Now we're getting on to the aravas. We already spoke about the lulav, the hadas, and now we're getting to the arava, the myrtle, the willow branch. Arava Gzula v'yavesha psula. Same thing as before. If it's stolen or if it's withered away and it's dry, and in all of these cases, there's, I should mention, in all the cases, there's different opinions as to how dry it must be for it to be puzzle. Some hold that if you touch it and it starts falling apart, it's puzzle. Others maintain, well, if it's dried out somewhat, but you can put it into water and it can refresh itself, it still would be kosher. Only until it becomes white and cannot be rejuvenated whatsoever, then it would be puzzle. Again, so the point is, according to the Mishnah, it gives simple ideas. Later, this idea is argued by different opinions. So again, arava gzula b'yavesha psula, a willow branch that is stolen or that is withered and dried out, puzzle is puzzle. Shalasher v'shalir anadachas, same as we mentioned before. If it comes from a idol worshipped tree or a condemned city, puzzle. Niktam reishay, if its top was cut off, nifritzu aleha, or the leaves fell off. Vatzavtzafa, and if it's called a tzavtzafa. Tzavtzafa is a type of tree. Psula, it is puzzle. Tzavtzafa is another variety, and it's actually not a willow branch. It's not a willow tree. Although it looks somewhat like it, it's not from the same family, and therefore it doesn't meet the cut. Doesn't make the cut. So a tzavtzafa tree does not. The branches that come from there are puzzle for the arava. Kimusha, if it's dried out, wilted. So v'shenosh miktzas alau, or part of its leaves have fallen off, if it's a minority. V'shelbal, and if it says arvi nochal. Nochal is a stream. Now, what the Mishnah is telling us here is that let's say it wasn't grown, but the willow tree wasn't by its stream. It was in a field where you water it by hand, or man water it, or even rainwater, it doesn't matter, but it's not by the stream. So the question is it kosher or is it not kosher? And says the Mishnah, in all of these cases that we're talking about here, it's kosher.
Even though the Torah said Arvei Nachal.
What? Even though the Torah says Arvei Nachal. Now in Chassidus it's explained that the other species have to be exact. This is the only one where the Torah indicates arvi nochal, and we don't follow that. Meaning to say, the Mishnah says clearly, even if it grows away from the stream. And there's a beautiful talk of the Lubavitcher Rebbe that explains the spiritual significance of this idea. We'll see maybe at the end, if we have time, I will discuss it, but it's a really beautiful idea. Mishnah Dalet, Rabbi Shmuel says, Shleisha Hadassim. You need 3 Hadassim. And that is actually the minhag that we have today. We use 3 Hadassim. Ushtei Araves and 2 willow branches. Lulav Echad. 1 lulav, Esrig Echad, and 1 esrig. Now, he continues, Afilu Shtayim Ktumim Echad Eini Kotum, even if 2 of these Hadassim are cut off on the top, and 1 is whole and complete, it would be kosher, because he essentially is of the opinion that while we use 3, we only actually need 1. So the other 2, even if they're not kosher, because they were clipped on the top, they're still acceptable. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Rabbi Tarfon says, Afilu shloshtam ktumim. He disagrees with all that. He says he disagrees with the earlier statements, and he says that even if all 3 were cut off on the top, it still would be kosher. Rabbi Akiva, he adds to the mix here. Kishem shalulav echad, just like we know we only have 1 lulav, the esrig echad, and 1 esrig. You don't use 2 esrigs, even if you're super from, super holy. You only use 1 lulav, 1 esrig. Says Rabbi Akiva, kach hadas echad v'arava achas. So too expensive. The lulav and esrig is expensive, a good one. So too, you only use 1 hadas and 1 arava. Practically speaking, what do we do today? We use 1 lulav, of course, and 1 esrig. The hadassim we use many in multiples of 3, or a minimum of 3. In Chabad, the custom is at least 6.
6 times 3 or 6?
No, just 6. And 2 haravas, that's it. Not more, not less. Esrog HaGozel. So we spoke about the three of the items of the 4 species already. Now we're up to the esrog, the most expensive for last. Actually, not always. There are some places where they charge a lot for lulavim as well. Esrog HaGozel. If a person using a stolen esrog, vayovish, and a dried out esrog, shalashera, or one that comes from a tree that was worshipped for idol worship. V'shal ir anadachas, and from a condemned city, just like we mentioned before. In all of these cases, in addition, shel arla. If it comes from an arla tree, what is arla? So the Torah forbids us from partaking from fruit for the first 3 years after it's planted. If a tree gets uprooted and gets replanted, guess what? The 3 years start anew. Fruit that are born within those 3 years are called orla. And orla are not allowed to be used. So says the Mishnah. They're not allowed to be eaten. But here we're saying they're not allowed to be used for lulav and esrog. In all of these cases, again, Asherah, Iranadachas, and if it's an orla tree, a tree that's younger than 3 years old, posel. In all of these cases, it's posel. You're not allowed to use it. Shel truma, tmeya. Truma, what is truma? Truma is, you take 1/40th or 1/50th or 1/60th of your crop, you set it aside for the Kohen. This is holy. Truma is holy. Can only be eaten in a state of purity and only by Kohanim or their wives or Mrs. Cohen or their slaves. They're non-Jewish slaves. They're Eved Kanani. So in any case, in all of these, so these are the people who can eat truma. So what happens if a person has an esrog of truma? Now, the Mishnah first talks about what happens if it's tomei truma. Tomei truma, it became ritually impure. Posel, it is not acceptable to be used for a lulav and esrog. Shel truma ta'ira. What happens if it was pure? It never became impure. Lo yitel. The rule is you should not use this for the lulav and esrog ceremony. Im notal, kosher. But if a person went ahead and used it anyway, it's kosher because it's still pure. Shel demai. What happens if it's demai? Demai means that an Amma Aretz, an unlearned person, gives it to you and tells you that, I took off Trumas and Maisers. So the rule is we don't believe him because he's unlearned. He doesn't necessarily even know exactly what the procedure is. We need to have more proof than just a person saying, I did everything according to the laws. As you'll learn throughout Mishnah and Gemara, these laws are complicated and complex. So, Beis Shammai says you can't use it because we don't trust that it was actually tithed and given truma from. Beis Hillel says it is acceptable. If a person tells you, and this is the rule, Beis Hillel says, if somebody tells you that truma and maasros were taken off, although you can't eat it, but you can use it for the mitzvah. Or actually, I shouldn't say you can't eat it. Usually you can't eat it. There are certain times you can't eat it. Shal Meiser Sheni. What's Meiser Sheni? Meiser Sheni is produce that has to be brought up to Yerushalayim and eaten there, or it's exchanged for money and then you purchase foods in Yerushalayim. So now if you have an esrig that's Meiser Sheni and it's in Yerushalayim, lo yitel, you should not use it for lulav and esrig. If not, they'll kosher because technically it can be eaten.
Because he's doing it in Yerushalayim.
Because in Yerushalayim. Also chazov, Mishnah Vav. Also chazov is al rubai. If it grew scab-like boils on the majority of it. Nitla pitmasai, or if the pitum on the top gets broken off. Niklav, if it gets peeled. Or nistak, if it was split down the esrig. Nikav v'chaser kolshu, or if it was punctured and now a little bit of even a tiny bit is missing. Posel in all of these cases, the esrig is now posel. This is one of the reasons I like to get an esrig that doesn't have a pitum to begin with.
It's only kosher if it falls off the tree.
If it had one and then it came off, then it's not kosher.
No, but I'm saying that's only until, like, if it landed on itself and the pitum broke.
No, there are certain ones that don't have pitums that grow without the pitum. Yes.
It's called murkav.
I thought that if it falls off the tree
It's
and
not
it
called
breaks
Murkav.
off
No,
naturally.
No. Murkav is something completely different.
Yeah, that has no pitum.
Murkav is completely different. We'll talk about Murkav.
If it doesn't have a pitum, there's no problem.
I'm sorry?
If it doesn't have a pitum.
Doesn't have a pitum. If it didn't grow with a pitum, it's no problem.
And before they say if it has like a scratch or something.
If it has a split, if it has a crack.
Split, yeah, split, I know. But if it has like
If it you puncture with a pen, with a needle, with something, with a knife. It's punctured and now you pull it out.
A natural dip.
And now dips are no problem. No. Also chazaz is al miyutui. Now, conversely, the Mishnah is going to go the other way. If boils covered it only on the minority part of it, nitel uktzoi, or its stem was removed, not its pitum, but the bottom part, that fatter part on the bottom.
That's the part that's
Nikav v'loy chasar kolshu, or if it was punctured, but nothing is missing. Kosher, in all these cases, it would still be kosher. Esrog akushi, an Ethiopian esrog, which is much darker, incidentally, than the lulavim that we're used to. Vayorik kecharti, and one that is green like a leek. Rabbi Meir machshav, Rabbi Yehuda posel. Rabbi Meir says it's kosher, Rabbi Yehuda says it's posel.
Like
now, interestingly, the Gemara quantifies the statement of the Mishnah, and it says that when is an Ethiopian a very dark style esrog, not kosher, only in other places, but in Ethiopia, where they're used to seeing such things, it would be acceptable. Okay, Mishnah Zayin, Shir Esrog HaKotan. What is the minimum size of an esrog? Rabbi Meir Eimer Ke'egez. Rabbi Meir says the size of a nut. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer Kabetz, it has to be the minimum size of an egg. It has to be a size of an egg to be kosher. Uvagadol, what's the largest size of an esrog? Kadesh Sheyichas Shnayim B'Yodei Achas. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to be able to hold two of them in one hand. Rabbi Yossi Eimer Afilo Echad B'Shtei Yadav. He says much bigger it could be. It could be so long as you can hold one of them in both of your hands, which is much larger, obviously, that would still be acceptable. And obviously, just going to shul, anybody who's been to shul in their lifetime could tell who the halacha is like. Obviously, we have some esregim which you certainly cannot fit two of them in one hand. Rather, it requires almost two hands to hold. Ein oigdim es halulav ela b'minoi. The Mishnah says in Ches, we can only tie the Mishnah. We can only tie the lulav with parts of a lulav. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir Eimer. Rabbi Meir says, "Afilu b'mshicha," even with a cord, which means even with another substance, not a lulav. Amar Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir furthers his point, and he argues for his point, saying, "Ma'asav Anshe Yerushalayim." There's a story that had happened with the great men of Yerushalayim, or the men of Yerushalayim, Shayoigdim es lulaveim, b'gimoinies shel zahav, with bands of gold. So this would seem to prove his point, that you don't need a lulav. Amrulai, they responded to him, that's not a proof. Because beneath those golden bands was actually a piece of lulav. So what was holding it together was the lulav. Now for decoration they put on gold, and so they dispute his point. At which point in the halal service did they wave the lulav? So we know when we say halal, we shake the lulav, we wave the lulav. So it says the Mishnah, V'haidul Hashem, Chilav HaSeif, Haidul Hashem Kitev, Ki Li'elam Chaste, the whole pasuk. So we do Haidul Hashem, by Hashem we stop, right? Ki Tev, Ki Li'elam Chaste. For all the words except for Hashem, we wave the lulav. In the siddur in the back, it'll give you all the details and the directions of exactly how to wave the lulav correctly. Uv'ana Hashem Hashiana, as well as when we say Ana Hashem Hashiana. Divrei Beis Hillel, these are the words of Beis Hillel. V'shamanai Oimrim, Af Bona Hashem Atzlichana. Now, who's the halacha like?
The halacha is like the first one.
Beis Hillel, because we all know that by Ana Hashem Atzlichana we don't wave the lulav. Amar Rabbi Akiva said, Tzeifa Yisiv Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. I was watching Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. Everybody was busy waving their lulavs. He's bringing a proof that they too only did it by Ana Hashem Hashiana. A person who was away for the day comes home and he's eating his meal, he realizes he didn't shake lulav and esrig. What the Mishnah is telling us is that he has to stop eating. There's a rule that you're not supposed to eat before shaking lulav and esrig. And so if a person came home and he's eating, and then he remembers he has to shake lulav and esrig, he can't finish his meal. You have to stop what you're doing, interrupt, wave the lulav and esrig, and then you can continue your meal. A person who, for whatever reason, did not wave the lulav in the morning, so he does it in the afternoon. Because the lulav and esrig ceremony is kosher, acceptable all day.
So if he doesn't, you have to. Is that a real thing like we do today?
Yeah, absolutely. We have people who go on Mivtzayim. We have people who go on Mivtzayim. You don't just go on Mivtzayim. Mivtzayim means campaigning, trying to get people who have not yet shaken the lulav and esrig to perform the mitzvah. So we don't just do this in the morning, we do it all day until nightfall.
Do you say halal if you're doing it?
You don't have to say halal necessarily. The mitzvah.
Do you have to say Ana Hashem?
You don't have to say Ana Hashem. When you're saying Ana Hashem, when you're saying halal.
During halal, that's when you do it.
Yes.
But the mitzvah is just to shake.
But that's not the mitzvah of waving the lulav and esrig.
Mm-hmm.
With a bracha.
With a bracha even. Yeah. Mishaya Evet. Vayishay Katan Makrenoisei. So now, let me preface what's going on here. This was very prevalent in the olden days that people didn't know how to read Hebrew. They didn't know how to read. So, what would they do? They would come to shul, and Chazan would say the Hallel for them, and they would answer afterwards, Hallelujah. Now, the thing is that only an adult male is required to daven Hallel, or required to daven the davening that we have it in this way. While women are required to daven, they're not required to formally daven as we do. Now, of course, it's a good thing that they do daven, but they're not required to. It's a mitzvah shahazman grama. It's a mitzvah that is established by time. Shachris is shachris time, mincha is mincha time, ma'ariv is ma'ariv time, and so therefore women and servants are exempt. So now the reading of the Hallel essentially is only required to be recited by men who are adults. So now, Mishoya Evedo Yishoya Koton, if a person had an Eved or a woman or a Koton, they themselves are not required to recite the Hallel. And Makrin say this person is going to be Yetze them reading the Hallel. So because they themselves are not required to fulfill this mitzvah, they cannot fulfill this mitzvah on behalf of you. And so therefore, if they know how to read and you don't, so whatever they say, you have to follow after them. You have to repeat after them because their words will not fulfill your obligation. As opposed to an adult male, since he can fulfill his own obligation, he can fulfill your obligation. He's also required the same as you. So in the previous cases, you have to actually recite word for word after them. And it should be a curse for him. What does this mean? Here he has a woman, the women in his neighborhood, even though they're not required to daven, or the children or the slaves, they sought to learn how to daven, and you who are required didn't learn how to daven. It's not looked upon in a positive way. It says it should be a curse upon him, meaning to say, get your act together and go learn how to daven, go learn how to read properly. If it was a person, an adult male, who's reading for him, so all he has to do is Hallelujah. After each thing he says Hallelujah. Now in truth, this is just saying what's done. The main thing is that you listen to him and he had you in mind. Because even if you didn't answer Hallelujah, you would still fulfill your obligation. What? Yeah. Mokim shenagu lichpoil yichpoil. Now here we're talking, once we get into the custom of Hallel, so the Mishnah is going to tell us very simply, Hakol is going to end off, Hakol kiminag medina. You follow the local custom. So now, let's back it up. Mokim shenagu lichpoil yichpoil. Wherever it says that you say certain verses twice, you say it twice. Livshait, you say it once, yivshait. If that's the minig, the custom in that place, you say it once. Lavarich acharav, to make a bracha at the end. Melech muhul batishmoches. Then you say it at the end. Hakol keminag medina. Now note everything as is the custom, the local custom. Now notice they didn't talk about the first bracha because the first bracha is universal. Before you perform a mitzvah, you make a bracha. The bracha at the end is more of a minhag. Halakeach lulav mechaveira b'shvius. Now a person who purchases a lulav from his friend in Shvius time. Shvius is the 7th year where everything, all the fruit of the fields and trees are all hefker. And you're not allowed to do business with these items. So how does the lulav and esrog market work in such a year? So the Mishnah tells us, well, the people selling have to make their money somehow. Noisulei esrog b'matana. What you do is you pay money for the lulav, you raise them prices for the lulav, and you give the esrog as a gift. So you didn't pay for the esrog; it was given to you as a gift. If you because you're not allowed to purchase fruit in Shvius time. You can't sell it, you can't buy it in big volumes. But says the Mishnah, originally the lulav was shaken and waved in the Beis HaMikdash all 7 days of Sukkah. But in the provinces outside of the Beis HaMikdash, only on the first day was the lulav and esrog used. But once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the great leaders, he made a takana, he made a decree, that everywhere, Zeichel HaMikdash, to remind us of the Mikdash, we use this lulav and esrog for 7 days.
They used to shake it on Shabbos in the base of Mikdash.
Well, we're going to get to that. Hold on. Zeichel HaMikdash. And what else did he decree? There was another thing he decreed after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. On the 16th day of Nisan, in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, they would bring the korban omer. Omer is a measurement. And then all of the grain that had taken root beforehand was now allowed to be used. Chodosh. New grain is not allowed to be used until the following year after the Omer offering was waved and offered in the Beis HaMikdash.
Is that why it says on those bags, Kemach Yoshan?
Yes, that's Kemach Yoshan and Kemach Chodesh. Yes, so there's a dispute as to whether Yoshan is applicable outside of Eretz Yisrael. The Chabad accepted minhag is that Yoshan is not applicable. Chodesh and Yoshan is not applicable outside of Eretz Yisrael. And being that the majority of Chodesh and Yoshan, the majority of grains are Yoshan anyway, so that's our custom. Others are more stringent on that, and they require that we have to have definitive knowledge that grain has at least passed the 16th day of Pesach. Now, in any case, in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, what would happen? They would do this waving ceremony, and everything that was stored up, waiting for this offering, would now become permitted. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai established this idea that you have to wait the entire 16th day. It would be Asr, because since the Beis HaMikdash wasn't around, so you don't know what time it was going to be, what time it would have been. Furthermore, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and this is very apropos for the 9 days that we're in, he said the Mashiach could come and the Beis HaMikdash could be erected in a moment, which would mean that later on the 16th day, we would be able to wave the Omer. So, because of this doubt as to whether or not we still will have the opportunity today to wave the Omer, because Mashiach would have come, he forbid the new grains until the 17th day. So the whole 16th day was Asr. While the Beis HaMikdash was around, in the morning they would make the waving, and then in the afternoon you can the grains were now called old because it had passed the service. Mishnah Yud Gimmel 13. Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag Shechag Liyos b'Shabbos. The first day of Sukkot that fell out on a Shabbos. So everybody would bring their lulav and esrog on Friday. Lamacharas, on the following day, mashkimim uvayim, they would get up early and they would come to shul. Everybody would recognize their lulav and esrog and they would use their own. Because the Chachamim say, because on the first day of Sukkot, you have to own your lulav. You cannot fulfill your obligation with somebody else's lulav. But the rest of the days, strictly speaking, you could borrow a lulav and esrog from somebody else. Rabbi Yesi says, Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag Shechol Liyos b'Shabbos V'Shochach V'Hotzias HaLulav L'Reshus HaRabim. This is, by the way, those days when we used to actually shake the lulav and esrog on Shabbos. In today's day and age, we do not. That practice has been suspended. Let's start again. Rabbi Yesi says, Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag Shechol Liyos b'Shabbos. If the first day of Sukkot fell out on Shabbos, V'Shochach, and a person forgot, V'Hotzias HaLulav L'Reshus HaRabim, and he walks out in the public domain with his lulav. We all know you're not allowed to carry on Shabbos. So Potter, he says he's Potter from a korban chatas, because he was supposed to use this. So being that he has a mitzvah that's associated with it, and it's an accident here, he makes him Potter from the chatas sacrifice. The Mishnah says the following. A woman who is technically not required to wave the lulav and esrog, why not? Because it's a mitzvah shazman groma, it's a mitzvah that the time creates the obligation. Because the day before Sukkot you're not obligated, the day after Sukkot you're not obligated. It's because of the time. The Sukkot itself we already mentioned that the women are not obligated again because it's a time-bound mitzvah. So now, one may think that the lulav and esrog would be muktzah for them because they don't have to use it on Shabbos. So one would think that it's muktzah for them. Says the Mishnah, "Mekabelas isha miyad bano miyad ma'ila." A woman could take it from her son and from her husband, and it's not muktzah for them. Why is it not muktzah for them? Because they can, as we do, they can actually use it for a mitzvah. They don't have to wave the lulav and esrog, but they can if they want to. And so therefore it's not muktzah for them. Well, furthermore, machzirasi l'mayim b'Shabbos, and they could put it back into, if it was left in water, in a vase of water, they could put it back on Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda clarifies, says, Shabbos machzirin, on Shabbos they could put it back. B'yom tov meisifin, they could add water to the vase if they needed to. Uvamoyed machlifin, and during Chalamoyed, they exchange the water altogether. It's not an issue. Koten hayedei l'naneya chayav b'lulav, a minor, a boy, a male, who knows the meaning and he knows how to wave the lulav properly, so he is already obligated to wave the lulav and esrog. Please join us again next week, Wednesday evening at 8:30 for chapter 4. Have a very good evening.